The story of Vikir van Baskerville paints a picture of a young man who faced an unending series of challenges and obstacles. Being born as a bastard child to a lowly concubine deprived him of the privilege and recognition that usually came with a prestigious surname. Vikir had to work twice as hard as his half-brothers to earn his rightful place in the family, enduring hardships and struggles every step of the way. Despite his tireless efforts, Vikir's fortunes took a turn for the worse, and he found himself embroiled in a dark and dangerous world of espionage, assassination, and smuggling, all in the name of protecting and providing for his family. He went to great lengths, risking his life and crossing numerous lines, to ensure the well-being of his loved ones. Yet, despite his valiant efforts, fate was not kind to Vikir. He was accused of being a spy for the demon tribe, a charge that was unjust and unfounded, but one that would seal his fate nonetheless. In the end, he was executed, his life snuffed out in a cruel and unfair manner. But even in death, Vikir could not let go of his fervent desire to live. His thoughts lingered on the hope of a second chance, a new beginning that would allow him to start over and live life to the fullest once more. "I want to live," he thought with a fierce determination. Gradually, Vikir's eyes fluttered open, his mind shrouded in confusion and disorientation. He felt an overwhelming weakness coursing through his body, as if all his mana and strength had been drained away. In a barely audible voice, he muttered to himself, "Where am I?" As he surveyed his surroundings, in a vast and opulent chamber, the sounds of infants' cries filled the air, their wails overlapping and echoing off the walls. These were the offspring of the formidable Baskerville family, a lineage of unyielding swordsmen renowned for their fierce temperament and dedication to the art of combat. A chilling realization dawned upon him. He found himself in a place that surpassed any hell he had ever known before, the dreaded Baskerville family home. This was where he had spent 30 long years of his previous life as a hunting dog. Soon after, Marquis Hugo Baskerville, the family's patriarch, surveyed the newborns with a cold and dispassionate eye, his initial assessment of them brusque and unfeeling. "They don't appear to be worth much," he observed, his words carrying an undertone of disappointment and disdain. Yet, amidst the cacophony of infant cries, something caught his attention. In the midst of the clamor, one cradle remained silent and motionless. It belonged to Vikir van Baskerville, an illegitimate child who had no right to be there, unlike his legitimate half-brothers who were several months older. As Hugo's gaze remained fixed on Vikir, a trace of tenderness entered his previously impassive face. It wasn't that he saw anything particularly remarkable about the child. In fact, he regarded Vikir as little more than a piece of refuse. Yet, in a room filled with howling, wriggling infants, the stillness of Vikir's cradle held a certain allure. With a sense of purpose, Hugo issued an order to the nannies who stood behind him. "Transport the children to the Cradle of Swords," he instructed. It was a trial that all Baskerville offspring underwent, beginning from the moment of their birth until the day they perished. The initial trial had just commenced, and it would continue until the very end. The Cradle of Swords, a unique ritual of the Baskervilles, was a grueling rite of passage that started from the instant of a child's birth. Innumerable knives were arranged in a circular pattern, forming a lethal maze that awaited the newborns. Each child was placed at the center of the labyrinth, free to wander among the blades, where even the slightest mistake could lead to severe harm or death. It was a journey to the Styx River. The Styx River is a legendary river that turns the bodies of children into iron. However, there is a limit to how many children it can affect. The moment they soak themselves in the river over a wall made of swords. It was a rite of passage that determined the fittest and the strongest among them. The competition was fierce and unforgiving, as the babies struggled to reach the river before time ran out. The older babies had a clear advantage, their larger size and more developed motor skills allowing them to navigate the maze with greater ease. But Vikir, the illegitimate child, was at a clear disadvantage. After learning that Vikir has apparently regressed to infancy, he is overcome with the desire for revenge. Unfortunately, with the limitations of a newborn body, he is unable to take any action. However, being placed in the Cradle of Swords presents an excellent opportunity for him to grow stronger. In order to achieve his goals, Vikir knows that he must become more powerful, and he is determined to do whatever it takes to succeed. As Vikir found himself thrust into the center of the cot and the cradle of swords, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the infamous rite of passage that he had heard so much about. Legends, myths, and ghost stories of the Baskerville family had circulated throughout his life, and now, he was living them. He braced himself for what he knew was to come next: escape from the cradle and a long soak in the river to gain an advantage over his brothers. With his small, delicate hands, Vikir twisted the blade and pressed it against his skin. He winced as the burning pain spread throughout his body, but he was no stranger to it. After all, he had lived a past life as a hunting dog, enduring much worse for decades. The cuts inflicted by the swords were nothing compared to the hundreds of wounds he had received in the past. For the Baskerville family, it was a long-standing tradition to hold blades that symbolized the challenges of the future from the very first birthday. And Vikir was not exempt from this custom. He gritted his teeth and pushed through the blade with all his might. Soon enough, he reached the holy land of Baskerville, where the Styx River flowed through the swamp, allowing the water from the Styx River to seep into his wounds. And without hesitation, Vikir threw himself into the river with a splash, enduring the painful sensation as the boiling water seeped into his countless sword cuts. He knew that the deeper the cut, the better it would allow the water to enter his body. But he knew that enduring this pain was necessary, for the water from the Styx River would seep into his wounds, tears, and bursting cuts, changing his body in a little while. And indeed, soon after, his body began to change as the water permeated his bones and intestines. The urgent voices from above echoed with increasing panic, urging Vikir to leave the river before it was too late. Despite the frenzied warnings, Vikir clung determinedly to a stone, impervious to even the commanding voice of Hugo Baskerville. At last, Vikir emerged from the river, gasping for air and coughing up water. He gratefully filled his lungs with the fresh, crisp air as Hugo Baskerville caught sight of him and let out a jovial laugh. As Hugo inquired about the young boy's name, he turned to the head butler, who revealed that the child was named Vikir van Baskerville. Hugo was surprised to learn that the boy already had teeth, leading him to underestimate him. However, in that very moment, he noticed a glimmer of potential in Vikir that he had not seen before. Hugo was struck with a newfound sense of determination, knowing that the young boy had what it took to become a great warrior. Without hesitation, he decided to welcome Vikir into the esteemed Baskerville family. Soon after that, the infant Vikir lay his tiny body, still unable to fully control its movements. He reflected on the circumstances before returning. At age 8, for the first time, he felt mana. In the outside world, he could be called a genius, but in the Baskervilles, he was just an ordinary person. By the age of 15, Vikir had achieved a level of mastery over his mana, such that a faint aura surrounded his sword when he wielded it. And by 20, he was being put to use by the clan for tasks such as assassination, intelligence gathering, and subjugation of barbarians. But it was in his mid-20s that Vikir truly began to distinguish himself. He lived and fought with a ferocity that surpassed even his peers, achieving a level of swordsmanship that would take others decades to reach. However, despite his prowess, Vikir's status as an illegitimate child meant there was a limit to how far he could rise within the clan. And when the gate to the demon realm opened and demons began to invade, Vikir was forced to endure an era of destruction and gain practical experience through killing monsters. Finally, after years of struggle, the war against the demons was won and the human empire emerged victorious. But for Vikir, his loyalty to the Baskervilles proved to be his undoing. False accusations were leveled against him, accusing him of siding with the demons. And so, at the age of 40, Vikir met his end on the guillotine, a faithful hunting dog betrayed by those he had served all his life. Soon after, strange thing happened. The nanny who had just left returned to Vikir's cradle, muttering something about a madam. The nanny then produced a large box from her bosom and placed it in his bed before quickly leaving again. As he looked at the box in silence, he suddenly heard a hissing sound. Something was squeezing the box, and two black triangular heads popped out. Vikir's heart raced as he realized that they belonged to a pair of deadly mambas. For Vikir, this had never been a concern. He had believed himself to be immune to such fate, believing it to be the work of malicious enemies or simple bad luck. But as he found himself standing amidst a nursery targeted by an assassin, he realized that his own life could be in peril. It was clear that the attack had come from within the family, an unsettling realization that left Vikir on edge. Two venomous mambas slithered towards him, their bloody jaws already slick with the blood of their previous victims. Vikir knew that if he did not act quickly, the children in the nursery would be slaughtered. Vikir then caught one viper in each hand, gripping them firmly near the nape of their necks. The two vipers stiffened in fear, their bodies sensing the presence of a higher predator. They froze under the pressure of Vikir's man-infused hands, before succumbing to the twisting force that broke their necks with a resounding crack. The vipers opened their mouths wide, their eyes bulging and tongues lolling out. Their broken bodies trembled, releasing dung and urine, and poisonous poison dripped from their fangs. The following day, at the loud scream of the first nanny who arrived at work, the family guards swiftly gathered in the nursery room. There, holding two broken-necked vipers with a sleeping smile on his face, was Vikir. The guardian knights were astonished to see the red and black mountain poisonous mamba in the nursery, even with its fangs removed. The discovery of such a monster in the children's room was a great tragedy indeed. Within moments, news of the incident reached Hugo, who hastened back to the parenting department. The nannies who had been on night shift were tortured and executed, and strict surveillance was established in the nursery. Despite the efforts made to uncover the culprit who had released the deadly poison, no one was able to find anything except for one individual. A young hound, unable to speak, had seen through the truth. Vikir van Baskerville, a legendary child who had swum in the Styx River longer than any other, and had slipped through the cradle of swords in record time. Vikir sat silently in his cradle, waiting for the perfect moment. A moment to pay off his debt, a time for revenge. With that, 8 years have passed. Vikir van Baskerville was 8 years old, and like the children of the Baskervilles, he was taking various classes. During today's lesson, the tutor enlightened his students on the art of swordsmanship and its various levels. He explained that irrespective of one's skill level, every swordsman starts as a sword beginner, lacking the knowledge of how to infuse mana into a sword. Moving up the ladder, a sword expert knows how to channel mana into the tip of their sword, but the resulting aura is weak and fragile. A sword graduator can manifest an aura dense enough to resemble a liquid, while a sword master possesses the ability to solidify their aura and shape it at will. The tutor then said Hugo, the supreme member of the Baskerville family, is a sword master. Everyone is surprised after hearing that. Of course, this is a fact that Vikir already knew. As the class progressed, Vikir was lost in thought, pondering over the urgent need to regain the power he had lost before his regression, just in time for the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony. Despite being only 8 years old, Vikir had already reached the advanced level of sword expert, a feat unknown to anyone in the family. In his past life, he had barely achieved this level when he was 20, but before his rebirth, he had risen to an even higher level of expertise. Lost in his own thoughts, Vikir couldn't help but wonder how many more years it would take him to defeat Hugo. Throughout the class, the tutor had his eyes fixed on Vikir, impressed by his exceptional talent. To say that Vikir was gifted would be an understatement. His talent was almost violent in its overwhelming force. Vikir's legendary feat of surviving for over 7 minutes in the river Styx as a mere 100-day-old child had already made him a legend in the Baskerville family. However, it wasn't just his physical prowess that was remarkable. His mind was also incredibly sharp, surpassing all his peers in the family. Truly a once-in-a-100-year talent, the patriarch would undoubtedly be overjoyed to hear of Vikir's progress. The tutor made a mental note to report all this to Hugo. After class, the children were going back to their rooms all over the castle. However, Vikir's progress was impeded by a group of 3 9-year-olds who blocked his path. They taunted him, calling him garbage van, and pushed him into a corner. To add insult to injury, one of the children proceeded to tell Vikir that he had heard some strange rumors about him. Supposedly, Vikir had submerged himself in the river Styx for a full 7 minutes, and had even strangled 2 vipers in their cradle. The other two children chimed in agreement. Vikir couldn't believe that he was being subjected to this kind of childish behavior. He wondered if this was just a simple quarrel between 9-year-olds. After all, the Baskervilles placed great importance on talent and skill, and such petty squabbles were unlikely to persist as they grew older. However, the reason why Vikir was paying close attention to the triplets in front of him was another. Because they are Hugo Baskerville's triplets. In 10 more years, they will grow into quite troublesome enemies. In fact, before returning, there are 3 hunting dogs who relentlessly pursued Vikir, who escaped through the siege. These guys have been tormenting Vikir a lot since he was a kid. It might be a good idea to put them in their place now, he thought. Soon one of them put out his blade and told Vikir, he heard that if anyone stay in the Styx River for long, their body becomes like steel, which means Vikir can't be injured by blades. Eldest brother gave a signal to his youngest brother, who was next to him. Youngest brother grinned when he saw the signal. He nodded his head, went behind Vikir, and covered his nose and mouth with both of his hands. As the youngest brother sneered at Vikir, taunting him about his rumored feat of holding his breath in the Styx River for 7 minutes. He arrogantly bet that he would eat his hat if Vikir could endure for even 3 minutes. However, much to their surprise, after 10 long minutes, Vikir still stood there without breathing, proving them wrong. The room fell silent, and even the triplets who had started the bullying were now drenched in cold sweat, realizing their mistake. All this time, Vikir had been staring at the triplets, without blinking his eyes nor changing his composure. There was nothing but grave silence. Eldest brother then told youngest to let him go. Just as youngest brother was about to take his hands off, he started screaming. Vikir spat out a finger from his mouth. Seeing Vikir smiling bashfully with a lot of thick blood on his lips, the faces of the triplets turned pale in an instant. Both of them turned their heads, their attention drawn to youngest, who lifted his palm and sniffled. The youngest triplet had been bitten, and it was his finger that was now missing. The triplets started to get flustered. Although seeing blood was a common occurrence in the children of Baskerville, it was a different story when it came to flesh being ripped off, along with broken bone fragments. The eldest brother comforted the youngest, telling him to calm down, and suggested going to the priest to have the finger reattached. Just as the eldest reached out to open the door, Vikir blocked their path and asked who gave them permission to leave. The distorted expression on Vikir's face didn't last long. The eldest brother then mustered up his courage and rushed towards Vikir with a dagger in his hand. However, despite the dagger properly piercing into Vikir's dress, the eldest brother's blade failed to draw a single drop of blood. After seeing that, he had a blank expression on his face. Vikir's body had reached a level of indestructibility at the young age of 8, thanks to the protection of the Styx. He caught hold of the eldest brother's hand and informed them that in Baskerville, age didn't matter as long as one had strength and talent. Now, Vikir wanted to play with them. With a swift movement, Vikir's fist connected with his eldest brother's face, causing a sickening crunch as his nose, bones, and teeth shattered under the force. His brother fell to the floor, writhing in pain and clutching his face. The other brother stood frozen, a blank expression on his face until he saw Vikir's incoming kick and instinctively turned his chin, trying to protect himself. The room was filled with the sounds of their screams, groans, and cries, each brother expressing their agony in a unique way. Vikir slithered in front of the door, a dark shadow casting over the 3 trembling twins who were clutching their faces, jaws, and fingers. "Don't be scared," he said in a low, menacing voice. "You'll get better in no time once you're treated. But I won't let you leave this room. You'll have to live with the discomfort of your own bodies at this rate." As the triplets shook with fear, a dagger was thrown in front of them, landing with a sharp clang on the ground. "There is only one brother who can get out of this room alive," Vikir declared, his patience wearing thin as he told them to decide quickly. Time was running out for them. In unison, the triplets' eyes locked onto the dagger glinting in the center of the room, and as if on cue, their bodies began to shake and split from the inside out. The transformation was quick and violent, each brother contorting and writhing in agony as their forms shifted and twisted until they were no longer recognizable as human. The once identical triplets were now 3 completely different creatures, each with their own unique abilities and strengths. The room was silent as the newly transformed beings surveyed their surroundings, knowing that only one of them would be able to leave this place alive. As the camera pans, we find ourselves in the presence of Hugo Les Baskerville, the master of the Baskerville family. A man of iron will and a skilled swordsman, he was also counted amongst the 7 pillars of the empire. He was deep in conversation with John Barrymore, the head butler of the Baskerville household, who had loyally served the family for 4 generations. John had arrived to present his first report of the day, one that concerned the recent bloodshed within the Morgue family, known for their mastery of magic and counted among the 7 noble families of the region. The Baskerville family had been locked in a territorial dispute with the Morgues over the ruby mine situated at the edge of their respective estates. The mine, located in the Red All Mountains, was the subject of much contention and had become a flashpoint between the 2 families. John Barrymore had come to update Hugo on the latest developments in the matter. As John concluded his report, Hugo listened attentively, his expression inscrutable. He mulled over the information for a moment before finally speaking up. "We will have an opportunity to discuss this problem soon," he said, referring to the dispute with the Morgues. "Someone from their side will be coming to visit us." He then turned to John and inquired, "Is there anything else to report?" To which John replied that Vikir had secured the first place in the midterm infantile evaluation. Hugo's stoic expression gave way to a look of surprise at this news. Seizing the opportunity to ask a question that had been on his mind, Hugo inquired, "When is the practical test for the children who entered the infant castle?" John informed him that the test was set to begin in just 5 days, and that most of the guardian knights of the young masters had already left on business trips to prepare, leaving the infant castle nearly empty. As John finished his previous report, his expression suddenly changed to one of excitement. He had one more matter to inform Hugo about, concerning the juvenile fortress. "There has recently been a big fight amongst the young masters," he revealed, his voice brimming with energy. At the mention of a fight, Hugo's previously impassive expression shifted completely. "How many died?" he asked, his voice low. John quickly reassured him. "No one has died, but all of the young masters suffered injuries. Their teeth were damaged, young Master Viro's jawbone was dented, and young Master Laurel lost the index finger of his right hand." He added that all of them had since been treated and were now in good health. Hugo took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, reassured by the news that no one had died in the fight. As he turned over the reports on the triplets, he murmured to himself, "They're so close to each other, there's no way they would have fought each other, right?" John concurred. "You're right, sir. They were in conflict with another young master." Then, John dropped a bombshell. "The person who wounded the 3 young masters is the 8-year-old young master, Master Vikir. The one with the highest scores on the written exam." At those words, Hugo's eyes lit up with interest once again. Shortly after, Vikir van Baskerville, who was now 8 years old, was summoned by the Patriarch. As soon as Hugo laid eyes on him, he commented, "You've grown a lot while I haven't seen you," which seemed to surprise Vikir. His typically sharp voice sounded dull today. Hugo then brought up the topic of the recent fight, mentioning that he had heard that Vikir had disabled the 9-year-old triplets in his senior class. Vikir responded calmly, stating that if Hugo was referring to those brothers, he believed they had received proper medical treatment since then. Hugo clarified that he was not referring to physical disabilities, but rather the disability of the heart. He explained that since that day, the triplets had been eating separately and didn't even speak to each other anymore. Their once decent combination technique had been completely torn apart due to the fight. Hugo then questioned Vikir's actions and asked if he thought it was wrong. Vikir responded with the belief that the stronger person couldn't be wrong. Hugo then mentioned that Vikir's brothers had already forgiven him, and yet Vikir still didn't feel an ounce of guilt. As Vikir basked in his happiness, a memory from his past life suddenly resurfaced. He vividly recalled the time when Hugo was visited by the youngest daughter of a family that had suffered at the hands of the ruthless Baskerville clan. Despite the many years that had passed, the woman had become a nun and, in a heartfelt moment, she had forgiven Hugo and offered a mass. Vikir's curiosity was piqued, and he knew how Hugo had responded to such a gracious act. However, the memory proved bittersweet as Hugo's response was far from what everyone had hoped for. He had callously declared that, "I believe forgiveness is just an excuse made by the weak who cannot seek revenge due to their lack of strength." As the words of Vikir's callous response echoed in the air, Hugo was consumed with a sense of joy, relishing in his belief that only the strong could reign supreme and that weakness was nothing but a sin. For Vikir, this was a familiar sentiment, having grown up with the family motto ingrained in his mind. Following this exchange, Hugo instructed John to allow Vikir to take whatever snack he desired from the food storage, provided it was something he could carry on his own. With a bright smile, Vikir requested chocolate and thanked the patriarch for his generosity. As Vikir turned to leave, Hugo reminded him to do well on the interim evaluation and not to lose to the direct descendants, underscoring the competitive nature of the family. In the next scene, John led Vikir to the food storage, where he proudly displayed the infamous chocolate enjoyed by the Gurmans of the Morg clan. He explained to Vikir that the chocolate was of the highest quality, obtained with great difficulty. However, Vikir surprised John when he expressed that he did not want anything processed and needed the cacao beans with a rich aroma. Without hesitation, John gave the beans to Vikir, explaining that they were known for their rich aroma and that with just one bean, Vikir could produce 100 liters of chocolate. John couldn't help but wonder at Vikir's passion for chocolate, but also praised his brilliance in finding a way to have as much chocolate as he desired while still adhering to the patriarch's restrictions. But Vikir did not want the chocolate to eat it. The bloody beans would be used during the practical exam within 5 days. On this day, a huge catastrophe would occur that has never happened at the Baskerville clan before. In this world, the legendary family known as the Baskerville family, but many refer to them as the Berserker family due to their extreme upbringing. The children from this family undergo a rigorous education from a very young age. As soon as they are able to take their first steps, they are put to the test with a grueling run up a steep mountain to test their basic stamina. They are not allowed to lie down or rest except during allocated times. When it's time for sleep, the young Baskervilles are required to sleep alongside a monster corpse to acclimate to tough environments. Once this period of training ends, at the age of 8, the young hounds begin their deadly evaluation. It is this intense and brutal upbringing that earned the Baskerville family their infamous moniker as the Berserker family. Today marks the practical evaluation for the survival exam, and the young hounds have gathered at the Noir Mountain, located on the outskirts of the territory filled with monsters. The instructor, known as Shadow Dog, explains that the basic contents of the evaluation are simple. The young hounds need to survive for a month in this treacherous environment, where they will have to hunt large and strong monsters while being mindful of 2 conditions: survival and success. The point system for the evaluation is as follows. If they successfully survive, they earn 10 points. If they survive without becoming disabled, they earn 30 points. If they fail but still manage to survive, they earn 50 points. If they survive after defeating a monster, they earn 70 points. If they fulfill all the above conditions, they receive 90 points. Furthermore, additional points will be given if they steal the badge given to them all from someone else. However, if they fail to survive, they will receive 0 points. It's important to note that there are no 100 points. The instructor emphasized the importance of recalling Sir Hugo's lesson that a swordsman's downfall is arrogance. Additionally, he advised the students to remain within the designated area, as Noir Mountain is a restricted region with many unexplored areas. It is advisable for them to stay within the zone where they have already triumphed over the monsters. During the examination, the Shadow Dogs, also known as Guardian Knights, will be covertly observing and grading the students. As the instructor was outlining the regulations, a few of the contenders caught sight of Vikir and whispered amongst themselves, remarking, "Isn't he the one who endured 7 minutes in the Styx River? And didn't he allegedly vanquish 2 venomous serpents inside the cradle?" Furthermore, they had heard that Vikir had scored a perfect grade on the written exam, and they were now curious to see if he would demonstrate similar expertise in the practical aspect of the test. Meanwhile, The triplet brothers seemed to be avoiding Vikir, seemingly afraid of him. As soon as the instructor rang the handbell, the participants dispersed in all directions, each seeking to secure a favorable position for themselves. Meanwhile, the triplet brothers chose to work independently, declining to collaborate with one another. At the same time, the instructor reminded everyone that this examination did not condone killing other participants. While not strictly forbidden, it was highly discouraged and would result in a point deduction. Consequently, everyone strived to avoid harming others needlessly. The shadow dogs were also doing their utmost to minimize any potential casualties. As Vikir ventured closer to the restricted area, a shadow dog began tailing him, intrigued by where the young master was headed. The shadow dog had heard rumors of Vikir's prodigious talents, and was eager to witness his skills firsthand. Eventually, Vikir arrived at a location near a sizable tree, where he noted that the soil appeared to be sufficiently soft. Having made his decision on where to stay for the time being, Vikir took a moment to rest and unwind, all while being observed by the shadow dog. The shadow dog couldn't help but wonder why Vikir had decided to take a break at this juncture. As the other participants engaged in a heated battle, Vikir went about his business of gathering wood, digging the ground, and eventually settling down for a nap. The shadow dog observed all of this and began to question the validity of the rumors surrounding Vikir's supposed genius-level intellect. If all he was going to do was hide, then there was little point in continuing to watch him. So, the shadow dog departed the area, unaware that Vikir had been patiently waiting for this very moment. As Vikir watched the shadow dog disappear into the distance, he couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia wash over him. Campaigning outside always reminded him of the old days. As he reminisced, his mind drifted back to a conversation he once had with one of his subordinates about using cacao beans to reduce the fishy smell of fish. According to the subordinate, bloody beans with a high concentration of cacao were the best for this purpose. Intrigued, Vikir decided to give it a try and put his cacao beans to the fire. As he watched the beans roast and crackle in the flames, Vikir mused to himself about how he had finally gotten rid of the one interfering with his plans. With everything he needed now prepared, he knew it was time to start his hunt in earnest. A few days later, Vikir found himself wandering around inside the restricted area. He couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and trepidation as he realized that from this point onwards, he was entering uncharted territory. However, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself as he remembered how he used to casually roam around this place during his scouting days in his previous life. As he walked, Vikir suddenly caught a whiff of something burning. It smelled like burned tree roots, and he knew that the creature he was hunting had to be nearby. Soon enough, he spotted a burning stool, the telltale sign of a monster's presence. Back in his scouting days, Vikir had found these droppings to be annoying, but now he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He knew exactly what kind of monster he was dealing with: a hellhound. The hellhound is a fearsome monster with a risk rating of B+ and a size of 3 meters. It was first discovered on the second ridge of the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. As its name suggests, it is a dog from hell and is known for bringing horrific disasters to those who cross its path. Its bite is fatal, and there is no known cure for its venom. One of the most terrifying features of the hellhound is the sulfurous flames that erupt from its mouth and eyes. These flames are highly gaseous and can easily trigger sparks. Any living thing used as firewood will burn uncontrollably until it is completely consumed. Facing this monster is not for the faint-hearted, and it takes a skilled hunter like Vikir to track and take it down. In his previous life, Vikir had struggled to defeat even one hellhound when he was just 18 years old. Now, as an 8-year-old child, it seemed impossible for him to take on a hellhound alone. However, Vikir knew of a way to defeat the creature that even a child could execute. When the battle between Vikir and the hellhound began, he quickly identified the hound's weaknesses. Firstly, hellhounds could only move in straight lines, making it difficult for them to change direction suddenly. Secondly, despite being lookout monsters, they could not cross even shallow water. Vikir seized this opportunity and threw water on the ground, slowing the hellhound down and exposing its weakness. As the hound charged towards him, its mouth wide open to attack, the Kir quickly threw something into its mouth. It turned out to be the bloody bean, a chocolate-making ingredient that could produce 100 liters of chocolate with just one bean. The Kir knew that chocolate was toxic to canines, and the bloody bean was no exception. The hellhound fell to the ground, unable to withstand the deadly effects of the bean. The Kir declared that even the Hound of Hell could not withstand the chocolate. The Kir unsheathed his sword, knowing that his best chance to defeat the hellhound was to target its weak spot. He assessed the situation, understanding that the hound's hard ribs would protect its vital organs, including its stomach and heart. Instead, he set his sights on the kidney, where there were no ribs to shield it. With precision and skill, the Kir launched a fierce attack on the hellhound's kidney, ultimately killing the creature. As he stood over the beast's lifeless body, a strange aura emitted from it, a powerful energy known as XP or karma that could accumulate in the body and make it stronger. The Kir absorbed the XP, feeling a newfound sense of strength and agility. He marveled at how his sword now felt lighter than before. With every victory, the Kir was inching closer to his former self before his regression. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression Hugo would make upon seeing that an 8-year-old had slain a monster with a risk rating of B+. As Vikir contemplated his impressive victory over the hellhound, he realized that he had likely secured his position as the top scorer in the practical test. He have already decided what reward he's gonna ask for, an enormous reward he would have never dreamed of asking for in his past life. He will take that, the value of which no one in this era really knows, except himself. As he moved to claim the head of the defeated hellhound, Vikir noticed a pack of other hounds closing in, no doubt seeking revenge for their fallen comrade. Without hesitation, he unsheathed his sword and sliced off one of their heads in a single swift motion. He had never intended to stop at just one, and he knew that he still had plenty of beans left to take on the rest. With his confidence renewed, Vikir called out to the remaining hellhounds, daring them to come at him. He knew that he had the bloody beans on his side. Just as the remaining hellhounds were about to launch their attack, Vikir noticed that they suddenly seemed scared and hesitant. He was taken aback, wondering how a mere 8-year-old's bloodthirst could instill such fear in them. But he quickly realized that the hellhounds would never submit to their prey, even if it meant certain death. Turning his attention behind him, Vikir was surprised to see a Cerberus standing there. The creature had a risk rating of A+, making it a formidable opponent. Vikir wondered how the Cerberus had ended up in this area and then noticed that it was bleeding profusely, with multiple arrows and other injuries visible on its body. He wondered if someone was trying to hunt it across the mountain in the barbarian tribe territory. As he pondered how the Cerberus had sustained such injuries, Vikir realized that this was his chance. An injured A+ rank monster presented a rare opportunity to boost his score even further. He resolved to kill the Cerberus, no matter the cost. Vikir had been concealing his true powers from the Baskerville household, including the fact that he had attained a high level of swordsmanship and had already mastered the Baskerville's third technique, a level that other members would only achieve upon reaching adulthood. However, in his fight against the injured Cerberus, Vikir unsheathed his sword and launched an attack. Despite his initial confidence, the Cerberus managed to shatter his sword and launch a fierce counterattack, catching Vikir off guard and using its claws to throw him into a nearby tree. After the brutal attack from Cerberus, Vikir found himself injured and momentarily unconscious. As he regained his senses, he felt a sharp pain in his left arm and feared that it had been torn off by the fearsome hound. However, upon closer inspection, he realized that the wound was not as severe as he had initially thought, and it could have been caused by the mystical waters of the river Styx. Despite his injuries, Vikir knew that he couldn't afford to take another hit from Cerberus, and would have to rely on his evasive skills since he had lost his sword. With Cerberus in hot pursuit, Vikir quickly assessed his options and realized that attacking the hound at this point would be impossible. Instead, he decided to retreat and make a run for the iron fence nearby. Though injured, Vikir pushed himself to his limits, knowing that every second counted. As he ran towards the fence, he knew that if he could make it over, he would have a chance to turn the tables on the relentless Cerberus. Soon, he reached the place where he had set the trap. After running a long distance, Vikir took a leap of faith and crossed the trap. Though it was a risky move, it was the only way to stop Cerberus, and Vikir expected that he had made it through the trap he had set. As Vikir caught his breath, he noticed that the ferocious Cerberus had stumbled right into the trap he had set. Though the trap had been specifically designed for hellhounds, it seemed to have worked its magic on the three-headed monster as well. Vikir knew that Cerberus belonged to the same species of cannon monsters as the hellhounds, and that the essence of the bloody bean he had spread on the wooden spears acted as a potent poison for them. Despite the poison's effects, the high-ranking demon was still alive, and Vikir knew that he needed to finish the job quickly before it regained its strength. He threw his spear towards the monster, causing it to slow down before collapsing. Vikir counted the creature's steps, and as it took its seventh step, it collapsed and died. He realized that the rumors about the wooden spear he had used were true. It was laced with the venom of the deadly mamba fawn that wouldn't allow the victim to take more than 7 steps after being bitten. Vikir was glad that he had kept it since his younger days, and it had proven to be a lifesaver once again. As he stood there, he could feel the energy of the monster flowing into him, making him stronger and more invincible than ever before. As he looked around, Vikir couldn't help but wonder why Cerberus had been in the area. It was common knowledge that Cerberus were gatekeepers that protected their territories and must have been guarding something nearby. He suspected that it might be a dungeon, a mysterious place known to harbor valuable treasures, and sometimes even powerful monsters use them as their lair. Now that Cerberus was gone, the dungeon was likely empty, and Vikir decided to investigate. He made his way to the location of the dungeon, hoping to find valuable treasure and artifacts that would aid him on his quest. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you want to see the next part of this video, please let me know by liking this video and subscribing to my channel.